recording in progress. So yeah, Adobe grants access for the course of the term, and then you're on your own. So yeah. Any questions before we get started?
I just bought a new Canon camera, and they recommended downloading their platform that's a lot like Lightroom. It's like Canon Professional. It's free, and I linked it right to my camera. Do you know anything about it? Is it similar to Lightroom, or?
I would guess it's probably like a watered down version. I don't know it, but my guess is that it does similar things, allowing you to adjust your images in term, light and dark, colors, and so on.
Okay.
The nice thing about Lightroom and applications that are not specific to one manufacturer is that it is open to any file type. So each manufacturer, camera manufacturer, unless it's a really cheap camera, allows you to shoot usually in two different file types. The general file type that all cameras shoot in is called the JPEG, and you've probably encountered JPEG files because almost all photos that are emailed and so on and downloaded are JPEGs. However, certainly all DSLR cameras, the larger cameras, and many of the smaller cameras also allow you to shoot in something that's called RAW. And RAW files are unmanipulated files, and no information has been dumped. So there are two file types, as you may or may not have read in the notes and the readings: lossy and lossless. And JPEGs fall into the first category, lossy. And that is that a certain amount of information is dumped in order to make the file sizes smaller so that you can take more pictures. Raw files are lossless in that they don't dump any information. They are, however, unformatted. So they don't have a structure per se. And so each manufacturer, Nikon, Canon, Sony, Pentax, Panasonic, and so on, have their own proprietary file structures for raw files. And so if you have a raw image, a raw file, and you double click on it, it may open up. If you use Apple products, for example, it may open up in the photo program, but it will automatically convert it to a JPEG because it can't handle the raw format. If you happen to have Lightroom and Photoshop, it will open up in Photoshop because Photoshop has a separate little program in it that deals with raw files. With Lightroom deals with raw files fine, but you have to import all of your images into Lightroom before you can use them there. And so that's what we'll go over today. Okay, so the Canon application that you mentioned, I'm sure is fine. And if you want to use it, of course, you can use it and check it out. For this class, however, we will be using Lightroom and also Photoshop, well, mostly because they are the standards for working on images, but also because you don't have to deal with proprietary issues. They accept all raw types, so far as I know, unless it's some very obscure homemade sort of thing. But you know, they're open to any type, any file type and any manufacturer. Okay.
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 And one more quick question. How about calibrating your monitor? I was told that's something very important to make sure your images that come from Lightroom and so forth match to what you actually print.
Yes. So if you print out your images, it is important that you calibrate your monitor. And I'm not up to date on the newest calibration equipment, but I can look into it for you.
Okay.
Most people, and I have to say I include myself in this to a certain extent, most people rarely actually print out their images. They look at them and deal with them on the computer for the most part and share them in that way as well. But there are definitely things that you need to do and to know if you're going to print out your images, and we will go over that. That gets covered a little later on in the term for us, but I will look into the calibration equipment. Okay. The one that I remember the most vividly, I guess, is called Spyder, SPYDER, I think it is.
Yeah, I ordered one of those from
Mhm.
Amazon. I should have it in a couple days.
Cool. And they work, I mean, when I used it, and it's been a while, it worked very, very well. I didn't have problems with, or no major problems with reproducing colors and so on after having calibrated the monitor. Any other questions?
All photos that we take this semester should be on our camera, not on our phone or anything like that, right?
Preferably, yes.
Okay.
Certainly, you know, certainly for the technical assignments, but if you know, if you shoot images on your phone that you want to work on, absolutely, you know, bring them into Lightroom by all means. I mean, the best camera that you have is the camera that you have with you, you know, and most of us have our phones pretty much at all times, right? So I mean, I myself shoot with my phone quite a lot, right? And they're excellent cameras. You know, they're so much better than like the first digital camera I got, which was 20 years ago, had a resolution, I think, of 1.7 megapixels, which is, you know, woefully inadequate these days. The phone camera, I think, is a 7 megapixel camera. So yeah, they're excellent, and the optics are really good. So the problem with the phone cameras and really basic point and shoot cameras is that you don't really have control over the functions of the aperture, the shutter speed, the ISO rating. So
And I found that out last semester with my point and shoot. This is not going to work.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
they're great for basic images, and I've seen, you know, a lot of point and shoot images that actually made exposures probably better than I would have done, you know, on the fly. But yeah, it's nice to have control.
Thanks.
So let's get started with Lightroom. Lightroom, I think, is a fantastic application. Photoshop has been the standard for many, you know, for like 25 years almost, for dealing with digital images. And it's an extremely powerful program. You can do amazing things with Photoshop, but Photoshop also has some drawbacks. The first, and for me, the primary drawback is that when you work on your images, the file is actually changed. The information is changed. And so If you like what you've done to a certain point, you have to save it as that, and then continue to work or work on another copy if you want to do other things. And each saved image can take up a tremendous amount of space on your computer, or if you're using an external hard drive, which is what I do, it takes up a lot of space. And you have to remember to name them and say version 1 or version 256 or whatever. So I find that to be a pain and a problem in terms of space. The second, not so much a drawback with Photoshop, but the basic functions of changing exposure and adjusting colors and basic adjustments are actually, I think, a lot easier to do in Lightroom. They're much more straightforward. They're much more obvious as to where to go and what to do. The third drawback, I guess, and thing I like very much about Lightroom is that, and this pertains to the first thing I mentioned about Photoshop, is that in Lightroom, the actual files, your images, are never changed. So you import images into Lightroom, and I'll show you how to do that. But then when you work on images in Lightroom, the actual file is not changed. It's kind of as if you're looking at your image and you place a piece of clear acetate over it, and all the changes that you do are sketches on that piece of acetate. So you see them, they are there, but they don't actually affect the image underneath. So rules are written, a series of instructions are written every time you do something in Lightroom. And what gets saved are those instructions. And every time you open up Lightroom, those instructions open up with the image. And that is the next real drawback, I think, of Photoshop, an advantage of Lightroom. And that is the fact that those instructions are saved and they are there with your image in Lightroom, and you can always change it. With Photoshop, once you close Photoshop, once you quit Photoshop, that entire set of instructions, that, the history of what you've done disappears and it's gone. And so Lightroom is great in that way. It keeps all of them. You can make as many virtual copies as you want, and work on them or go back, back and forth between different versions. And again, you're not taking up tens or hundreds of megabytes of space. Okay, so that's my spiel on Lightroom Classic, and why I really, really like it very much. And for any basic stuff, prefer it to Photoshop. Okay. One of my colleagues, my predecessor at MPC, said, "Oh, you should teach them Photoshop first, because if you teach them Lightroom first, they won't go to Photoshop." And that actually, is true for many things. But there are some things, of course, you have to go to Photoshop for: importing other images, pulling little things in from other places. All of those things you need to do in Photoshop. So that said, let's get started with Lightroom, and let me just share. Well, let me open Lightroom first. Well, no, let's share the screen first. And open up Lightroom Classic, again, Classic. So let me get out of that because I want to open a new one. And I apologize, my my computer, which is not ancient, it's 3 years old, just is so slow sometimes, and especially with Lightroom. So when you open up Lightroom, and I put my Lightroom icon in the dock, when you open it, and it especially after you've been using Lightroom for a while, you may have different versions, you might say. So this opens up and it says select a catalog, and you probably don't have a catalog, so you will create a new catalog. And when you click on that, another window will come up, and I have to tell you, I use Mac, and so these things will be slightly different on PCs, okay? And I can't tell you all of the differences because I'm just not a PC user. Anyway, this new window will come up and it will say create folder with new catalog. And so let me show you what I have done. So you need to designate a place on your computer or on your an external hard drive, a place where your Lightroom stuff will live or reside. And so I have my stuff, my school stuff on one hard drive. I have my other photo stuff on a different external hard drive. And that's so that I can keep a fair amount of space on my computer open. All right, so I have these hard drives. I get them usually at Costco. And I have to say, I don't work for Costco, but I find that Costco's prices for electronics beat everyone else by a lot. And periodically they have discounts on these things. So this is, I think it's a 4 gigabyte hard drive. And I've gone through several, over the years, at least several. I have a bunch lying around somewhere. But anyway, these are great for storing images. It's always good to have backups, a couple of backups. So I have one huge hard drive on my desk just for storing everything. And that's my main backup. But again, I use externals. They're easy. You can carry them with you. And you don't want to store your images long-term on things like little thumb drives or flash drives. The memory cards that go in your cameras are really, really not good for long-term storage of images. They're really easily corrupted or damaged, lost, So it is a very, very good idea to get your images off the memory cards as quickly as possible and put them onto some sort of hard drive, your computer's hard drive or an external. So as I said, this hard drive of mine, this one is for school. And so all of my MPC stuff is here under MPC. And so for this class, ARTP12, I have a new folder for that, and it's for fall 2021. And within that, I've made a folder for Lightroom. And you, of course, will store your Lightroom stuff wherever you decide to store it. But this is where I have my Lightroom stuff for this class. And so within the Lightroom folder, I have made another folder that's entitled Images. And that's where I will put my images when I import them into Lightroom. But for now, I'll have my Lightroom catalog And that's the sort of general heading, and you might say folder, for all of the stuff you choose to have go into it. So this is where I want it to be for fall 2021 in my Lightroom folder. And then I need to entitle it. And so I will, you can entitle it as whatever you want. And I will entitle mine ARTP12 fall 2021. Okay. And so when I open Lightroom, after I've created this this catalog, obviously, this will show up and I'll select this catalog. Okay, so then I hit create. And now this is called I think the splash screen that comes up. And it's updating plugins information. And so this is Lightroom. This is how it appears. And I just want to show you where this thing that we just created went. So again, here's my MPC folder on my external hard drive, ART12, and within that Lightroom. And now I have two folders within the Lightroom folder. And in the top one, this itself is the catalog. And then the other things here are supporting information and so on. So if for some reason when you open Lightroom, your catalog doesn't show up, you can go to where it is on your hard drive and double click on it. And that should open up Lightroom for you with that catalog. Can you all see that? Should have asked you before. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so Lightroom. This is how Lightroom will appear, Lightroom Classic. At the top, you can put your name in here if you want, otherwise it'll just say Adobe Lightroom Classic. And then over to the right at the top, you'll see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 words, and these are modules. They're called modules. Library, develop, map, book, slideshow, print, and web. We will be working primarily in library and develop, and we'll go over the others certainly, but these two modules are where we'll do the vast majority of our work. So the library, which is what this is open to now, is where you'll see your images, where you'll select them and so on. So Lightroom is also a database, and that's really cool as well, because you can organize your images in any way you want, or in many ways. You can assign different words to the images so that they'll come up with respect to the date, or where they were taken, or who they are of, or what they're of, or however you want to designate them. So all the images that you have imported into Lightroom, into this catalog, will appear in the library module. When you want to work on them, you'll go into the develop module, and we'll talk about that a little later on, or certainly in another Zoom meeting. So the first thing that you want to do after you've created your catalog is to set the preferences for Lightroom. And so to do that, you'll go up to the top here where it says Lightroom Classic, open the pull down menu, And just under where it says About Lightroom Classic, it says Preferences. So we will open that up and go through these different sets of preferences. So the first one is general preferences. And you choose the language that you want to use. The next one says settings, show splash screen. That's the screen that comes up that says Lightroom Classic. If you don't want it to show up, just unclick it, your choice. This one is the big one for me in the general preferences, and it says default catalog. When starting up, use this catalog. And so I have a lot of choices because I have lots of different catalogs. But generally your choices, the main choices will be load most recent catalog or prompt me when starting Lightroom. And so I like to be prompted. I like to have choices. Next, import options. Show import dialog when a memory card is detected, doesn't really matter. Select the current previous import collection during import. That means that when you've opened up, when Lightroom opens, it will show you the previous import. So it doesn't, it's up to you. Ignore camera generated folder names, that's fine. This one you should check, and that says treat JPEG files next to RAW files as separate photos. And this refers to when you're shooting RAW and JPEG images together. So most cameras will allow you to do this. You can tell the camera to shoot in both RAW and JPEG. It'll make two files of the same image, one RAW and one JPEG. And that's very handy to have if you just want to quickly, send an email or post something and you don't care if you've manipulated it or not. The JPEG files are much smaller, they load more easily. And so you might want to do that. So you want to check this, because if you don't, then Lightroom can sometimes get confused as to which one you want, the RAW or the JPEG. You don't necessarily want to replace the embedded previews with standard. It kind of doesn't matter that much. If you're having a real problem with Lightroom being really slow, you might want to check this, but it's up to you. Then the sounds, if you want Lightroom to tell you, or indicate to you using a sound that it's done certain things, you can set that. So I'm sure you're familiar with your computer sounds or no sound. And of course, normally we would be working in the photo lab, in the digital lab. And when we're all working together, it's best probably to select no sound. Otherwise, there'll be all these beeps and things going off all the time. Your choice. Next, up here at the top of the preferences window, presets. I wouldn't worry about this very much. Global, Adobe default for the time being. I would leave it at that. There are presets that you can tell Lightroom to apply when you import images into it, but the reason we're using Lightroom is to do our own manipulations. So I would just leave it as such. External editing. So these are settings that determine the quality and what's called the color space that you use, how much detail there will be in your image, and so on, and resolution, which is that's a different subject. But anyway, this is divided roughly into two sections: edit in Adobe Photoshop and additional external editor. So you have a choice between TIFF and PSD file types. TIFFs are, they can be lossy or lossless. They're much larger files. And so it's often recommended that you use PSD, which are Photoshop digital files. Your choice. I'm a lot of photographers do, but you certainly don't have to. The color space, ProPhoto RGB is a good one to use. Adobe RGB, as you can see, 1998 is 23 years old. I wouldn't, given a choice, I wouldn't use that. Display, you don't necessarily want to use that because then it's specific to one display and won't carry over very well to other monitors, or when you're, if you want to print it and so on. sRGB is a more standard color space. And so when you're printing, you may want to convert to sRGB. But in general, for working on your images, you want to use ProPhoto, which gives you the most number of colors, for one thing. Bit depth, you might want to read about what bit depth is in our readings in my notes, but it's how much detail there is and color information. And 16-bit is the highest, and that's what you want. You can always reduce things. You can make them smaller. You can, with resolution as well, you can decrease it. But once you've changed it, that's it. It's gone. And so in general, you want to shoot at the highest resolution with the most colors that you can, the greatest bit depth, because then you have all that information. And also shoot in color, not in black and white. So you have all of that information, and then you can convert to black and white later, make a copy and convert it. You can reduce the file size in several different ways, but at least you have all of that original information. So the resolution, the default, I think, is usually 240. It's not a huge difference, but you can do 240. There's one lower than 300, and then 600 or 660. 300 is what's often recommended. Okay. And then below, additional external editor, that's more for when you're working, or when you're going to print or send your images to be printed or processed in some ways. I have it set pretty much to the same as up here. But if you're sending it out, or if you're going to be printing, you probably are going to shift this to sRGB. And you may shift it to JPEG, depending on the requirements of where you're sending it, or how, size limitations, file size limitations. And you can see when I shifted to JPEG, the bit depth automatically goes down to 8 because a lot of information gets dumped with JPEG. The resolution stays at 300. Yeah, and that's it for this one. File handling, file extension. I don't think it makes any difference if it's uppercase or lowercase. JPEG preview, I set to full size so that I can see, I get the most definition and detail that I can in Lightroom's preview. Embed fast load data, that's fine. But if you embed the original raw file information, then that greatly increases the file size and also the time it takes for Lightroom to deal with it, to open and so on. So I would keep that unchecked. This is, treat these as separators. I wouldn't worry about those. File name generation. This is I think, one of Lightroom's major drawbacks, and that is that it only accepts certain characters in a file name. And if you use something like the number or pound sign or parentheses, quotation marks, anything really, then Lightroom won't recognize it and won't import that file into Lightroom. And I think that's really, but that's how it is. So when you are entitling your images for submission to me, for example, I've given instructions on what you need to do, because if you include even one quotation mark or a colon or a semicolon, Lightroom won't recognize it. Really stupid, but there you have it. So it says treat the following characters as illegal, and that in and of itself is misleading because they're all illegal. Whichever one you choose, they're all illegal. Okay. You can use dashes and you can use periods. Interface. These are controls for how the image appears to you in Lightroom. I just use the defaults pretty much. I think the default for the screen color behind the image is actually medium gray, and I put it to dark gray. It's whatever you prefer, okay? But they're like the fill colors and so on. Performance. So this is important. The first part is use graphics processor. And I'm just now experimenting with this off. You probably want to set it to auto. So the graphics processor is part of the computer that deals with images, graphics, videos, still images, and processes them using that processor. And it's designed to deal with images. It also can, uses more memory, and it can slow things down if your computer has a tendency to be slow anyway, or if it's an older computer. Theoretically, when you set it to auto, Lightroom judges when it's necessary and when it isn't. You can also set it to custom. You can tell it to just use it when you're using a big display, because it works pretty well when you're using a big display. But if you're using a small display, for example, I use my laptop, then it's more of a hindrance. It just makes it take longer. So anyway, I usually have it at auto, but I'm experimenting with it on off. I'll let you know if it does anything. Next, camera raw cache settings. This is how much memory you are allocating to Lightroom to make use of for working on images. And I think it comes set at like 5 gigabytes or 2 gigabytes, which is minuscule. Your computer will come to a complete standstill if you don't increase the size. 50 gigabytes is the maximum. That's what I keep it at. And 40 to 50 is what's recommended. So I would just keep it at 50. And then that, and that being the max, Lightroom can use as much memory as it can on your image, and you won't get a spinning beach ball of death, or not as readily anyway. Limit the video cache size doesn't really apply to this, so don't worry about the rest of these. One thing you might check out eventually is optimizing the catalog. As with computers, if you don't shut them down for a really, really long time, little errors build up. And so you're supposed to shut down the computer every now and again so that it can clean itself, and get things back in order. And optimizing the catalog will do that for your catalog. So if your catalog is large and has been running slowly, optimizing may improve performance. May take several minutes. You will be unable to use Lightroom during this time. So since this is a brand new catalog, I'm hoping I don't need to optimize it at this time. The next is Lightroom Sync, and that's how it syncs to Lightroom non-classic. And really there's very little. You can specify a location for the synced images if you want to. You can see the default here is the users and then into the pictures folder if you want, or you can designate a different folder. Display, I'm not using a separate monitor, so that's not an issue here. But if you do use a different monitor, external monitor or monitors, those will show up here. And network, I have not networked this, so it's not an issue. Were we to be in the lab, it would be preset anyway on the computer, on the school computers. Right? But you can sync yours to the school computers using this. Okay, so those are the preferences, the general preferences, and they will take effect when you quit Lightroom and restart it. But before we do that, we're going to go back, we'll close that out, and then go back to the pull-down menu under Lightroom Classic. And now under Preferences, it says Catalog Settings, as if you didn't have enough preferences to deal with, right? So we'll open up Catalog Settings, and this just has 3 areas. So the first is General. And the first thing it shows is the location of your Lightroom information. And so you can see here, it's showing where mine is. The volume is my external hard drive, and then the folder on that, and then folder within folder within folder within folder. So MPC, and then my ARTP12, and then that Lightroom, then fall 2021, then the Lightroom folder I made. And within that, excuse me, within that, the folder that I made specifically for the catalog. And if I hit show, then it opens it up in the Finder, and you can see it here. So back to this, and then backup, and you can determine when you want the catalog to back up. And the default is once a week when exiting Lightroom. And I choose, and I think that you should choose, at least once a day when exiting Lightroom. And I do every time Lightroom exits. So, and it will still ask you if you want to do that. So if you've just opened it up for 5 seconds and then think, oh, I don't want to deal with this right now, and you hit quit, there's no reason to back it up at that time because you haven't done anything. But it's good to have the option. And so, yeah, I would select every time Lightroom exits. File handling. These are the defaults again. So the standard preview size, I would choose auto, and that's the largest. The preview quality, I usually choose high, but I don't think it's a big deal. You don't want low, because you want to be able to see this image and what you're going to do to it. And then automatically discard the previews. I say never. I can dump them myself if I want to, but I don't want to have to keep track and think, oh my God, 30 days is coming up. Do I want them dumped? I would never remember to do that. So I hit never for that. Import sequence numbers, unless you have some reason not to start at number 1, might as well start at number 1. And then finally up here, metadata. The only one I would say it's kind of important to keep unchecked is this third one at the top, automatically write changes into XMP. And XMPs are separate files that are written to go along with your file. And those files that contain all of the information about what you've done to the image. They take up space, and Lightroom it may not always recognize immediately that it needs to use the XMP file. So I would say don't do it. Address lookup, if you want all the GPS stuff to show up each time, you can check it to do so. If you have these checked and you want to disable them, you can do that here in Lightroom itself. So if you want to pause them, it's up to you. Theoretically, these can suck up some time when you're processing your images, when you're working on them. And so if you don't really need them, you can turn them off, or at least disable them when you're working on images. Automatically detect faces in all photos. That's, up to you. I don't do that probably because I'm older and it's not something I'm used to doing, but up to you. And then write date or time changes into proprietary raw files. So this will show changes that have been made, and that's entirely up to you in the metadata, which we'll talk about later. So that's it for the catalog settings, and we've done the general preferences. So now you're going to quit Lightroom, and it should ask if I want to back it up, and I'll say yes, because I've made these changes to the preferences. And yeah, it shouldn't take too long because there are no images yet. Okay, so that is how to create a catalog in Lightroom. It's really very simple. It just takes a little while to explain it. So now I've reopened Lightroom, and now I don't know why it's not at the top, but here is the new catalog that I've made, ARTP12 Fall 2021. And it looks like it says Ear Cat, but it's lowercase l, LR Lightroom catalog. And you can double click it or click on the open button and Lightroom will continue to open. And here we are back into Lightroom in the library module. So any questions? All good so far? Okay.
Yeah, so far so good.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so far so good. I followed along with you and did all my preferences too.
Oh, good for you. Excellent. Good. That way it's done. And if you have any questions, I'm right here. All right. Excellent. So now you have Lightroom ready to go. And the next thing to do is to import images into Lightroom. As I said, I seriously advise you to download your images from your cameras relatively quickly. If you shoot every day, it's a good idea to transfer them every day, and that way your memory card also doesn't get clogged up with many images. So most cameras, though not all, use SD cards, this type, that have little contact things on the back. Some still use something called a compact flash card, which is a bigger card that has little holes on it, that fit into the camera, and the camera has these little needles that go in. But anyway, most cameras now use these SD cards that come in different sizes, different capacities. This is a 64 gigabyte card, which holds a great number of images. when I started with digital photography a long time ago, um, the memory cards came with like 40 megabytes. I remember I got a deal on an 80 megabyte card because I worked at a photo store, and it was expensive too. It's like $60. Now you can, and so that was 80 megabytes. These are gigabytes, and so a megabyte was 1,000 megabytes. So you get the idea. And I don't think they even make 1, 2, 4, and 8 gigabyte cards anymore. So these hold a tremendous number of images, and so obviously they are stored when you're using them in your camera. Each camera has a slightly different place. This is a Canon EOS Rebel T6. It's an older camera that it's not one I usually use, but anyway, here it is. So with that card in there, I've got this set to shoot only raw images. So the raw images are the largest files will be the largest files, then JPEG, and there are different qualities of JPEG. Usually it's fine, normal, and basic. So let's see here. Cedar does not really know the camera that well. I'm sorry, I couldn't find my other camera, but it's here somewhere. So
What setting do you have it on for it to just shoot raw?
so that's generally under quality or image quality. And so if you go into the settings, there should actually just be a button that says quality. But this one, I don't see that here. So I went into the menu, and there are different menu windows. Okay, there we go. Image quality. So I've gone into the menu, and in one of the menus it says image quality, and then I have options, and I can just shoot in RAW. I can shoot low quality, higher quality, and this uses some icons that are not always so straightforward. So L has L, M, and S. And I have to say, I don't even know what many of these mean, but they have a curve or steps like that. And the curved selection is the higher quality. So the little steps are referred to pixels. And that means that the image quality will be lower. And so as I select these different file types, the number of images I can make will change. So with RAW, just shooting RAW, on this 64 gigabyte card, I can make 7,723 images, which is a ridiculously large number of images. But if I then go to a lower, into JPEG and use a lower resolution, so to speak, lower quality, then the number of images I can make doubles. So I can make like 15,000 images. And then if I go to the lowest quality, I can make like 30,000 images and fit them on this card. Now, I don't really recommend doing that, but you can. As they say, just because you can doesn't mean you should. But anyway, my point is, I guess, that as you as you lower the quality of the image, the number of images that you can make and store on the card will increase. Okay. So let's see here. So I have it set at RAW. I can also set it at RAW and plus JPEG. And so I'll do that for now. And then I'll get out of that menu and so on. Okay. Oh, I said this before. When you first buy a memory card, or when you first get your camera, the first thing you want to do before you start shooting any images that you want to keep is to do something called formatting the card. And so to do that, you'll need to go again into the menu, and each manufacturer has these things laid out differently. So I need to find here formatting the card. So this is under tools, and the tool menu shows a little wrench. The third selection says format card. And the card is just kind of open. It's like a blank page when you get it. And when you format it, it makes it specialized, I guess you might say, to your specific camera, or at least to your, this model. And this means that the images, the files are less likely to become corrupted or damaged, and it will make the card last longer. And so this is something you should do regularly after you've gotten your images off, because when you format the card, it erases all images. So this message or something like it will always come up when you select format the card. It says, all data will be lost. Attention, exclamation point. And then you have two choices, cancel or okay. And the default is cancel. So it's giving you two options to get out of this and not format your card, in case there are images on it. So it's supposed to make you stop and think like, oh, do I have any images on this? Maybe I should get them off first. So you can hit cancel to get out of there, or you physically have to shift over to okay to format this. But it's something that you should do after you've gotten your images off the card, and you will find that your cards will last quite a long time. I don't even know how old this card is. It's certainly not new, and it's lasted, knock on wood, for a long time. Okay, so once you've gotten your images off the camera and organized as you see fit, you'll want to import them into Lightroom. And so you'll choose which ones you want to import. And I think I did choose some. So I've decided, so this is how I organize some of my images. On my main hard drive, I've got many folders. So here is a folder, it's entitled 2018. And within that, I have a whole lot of folders by date. So now I've forgotten which one I selected, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. And so I don't entitle each image because that would take absolutely forever. But I do put them into separate folders so that I know what they are when they were taken. So I organize by year, by month, and then within month by occasion, or what was going on. Yeah, okay. So that's how I organize my images. You may have some other way of doing it. That's fine. Let me go back to Lightroom here. So I decide what I want to import, and then here on the left-hand panel, left-hand side of the screen, at the bottom, it says import. So I'll click on import. And it spins for a while because this is my computer. And then will show up. If you just have your computer, that's what will show up. So that's the first one I have here, Macintosh hard drive data. And then these are two of my hard drives that are connected. And so I will come into this one, and I have opened up 2018, which is now 3 years ago, but and then I choose something, right? That one, anyway, whatever. Okay, and so the images will show up in the center area, and you can decide if you want to import all of them or just a few or just one. No, that's up to you. Sorry, there was one I wanted to import. Anyway, it doesn't much matter. So here are some images. I'll just go back to that one. And then below them, it says check all, uncheck all. So if I uncheck all of them, you can see they get darker. And then if there are only a couple that I want to import, maybe this one and I don't know, that one and that one, then I can just select a few or check them all. So on the left is where I choose the images, so the source. And then at the top, I decide what I want to have happen to them. We're going to ignore add and move because those assume that the images have already been imported and you're just moving them somewhere else. So the choices here are copy and copy as DNG. Copy will copy the images in as whatever file type they are. So you can see mine down here, it says DSC7168.NEF. And NEF tells me that this is a Nikon image. So as I said earlier, each manufacturer has its own proprietary raw file type. So Canons are CR2s and Nikons are NEFs, and I'm not remembering the others offhand, but each one has one. So if I hit copy up here, it will copy it as an NEF. If I select copy as DNG, it will convert this to a DNG, which is a digital negative file. And it's a universal negative file rather than a proprietary one. And so that can be preferable because it is not just a Nikon file. Theoretically, the DNGs last longer. They're not quite as corruptible. I don't know if that's actually true. But I generally select, I just do copy as DNG. If you have JPEGs, they remain JPEGs. So this refers to raw images. Okay, so I've selected all of them to import, and I've decided to make them DNGs. Oh, those are dark. I'm so sorry. Why am I obsessing about this? I don't know why. How about the beach? That sounds nice. Okay. Now, on the right-hand side, you decide where the images are going to go and what happens to them. So actually, what happens to them is what you select first. So the first part, let me close all of these. So there are sections: file handling, file renaming, apply during import, and destination. So file handling is what happens to the file. Build preview standard is fine. Embedded and sidecar adds, more time because it has to make it takes more space, adds more time. So standard or one-to-one, either is fine. Build smart previews. I keep that checked. I almost always have my hard drives with me, but this allows you to work on your images even if they're not there. So if you brought your computer along but forgot your hard drive, which had your images on it, you can still work on them in the develop module if you have Lightroom build smart previews. There are certain other things you cannot do, like setting it up for printing, I think. But you can work on the images if you have smart previews built, so I do that. Don't import suspected duplicates. So if you have this checked and you select a certain number of images, or as I've done here, selected a folder, Lightroom will indicate to you if you've already imported those images, and they'll be grayed out. So that's pretty helpful, I find, if in case I've forgotten, if I've already imported something. If you know that you want to import them again for whatever reason, then you'd uncheck it. Make a second copy too. This is good if you're importing the images directly from your computer, from your camera, because which you can do, and that will save time for you if you want to import them into Lightroom immediately. This will save time in terms of importing to another place, or a hard drive. You can make a second copy to where you designate. So this is my hard drive, and into the 2021 folder, wherever you want it to go, you can tell it to do that. I like to import my images onto a hard drive first, because I don't necessarily want every single image or everything I've shot to go into Lightroom. So I like to have that option. But it does undoubtedly save time if you know you want all of those images into Lightroom. Okay, add to a collection. We don't have collections yet, but later on, when we've made different sets of images, you can have those images go directly to a specific set or collection of images. So that's file handling. Next is file renaming, which I don't do generally, but you can if you want. You can designate any file name that you want, and that will be applied to every image in this import. Apply during import. You can have certain settings applied if you want. I don't recommend that generally, because again, we want to be working on our images in Lightroom, but you can do that. Next is metadata. Metadata is the information about the image that is embedded into the file. So every digital image file has metadata incorporated into it. And that includes the camera that was used, the settings, the lens, the aperture setting you used, the shutter speed, the ISO, a whole lot of information. If you had the GPS turned on, it will indicate where it was made. Of course, it indicates the date and time. But you can also put your own information in, and that also will be applied to every image in the import. So here I have two, so let's take a look at those. Make a new one. Sorry, let's do this. Edit presets. It's not doing. Okay, anyway, so this will allow you to control information that is embedded in the file. So basic info, that is the name of the image, like number 5220 and so on. If you've given it any ratings, which we haven't done because we haven't imported them yet, those will be applied, but they can be applied after the fact, or will be if you have this checked. Camera info, if you want it to be. Here's what I put in, and that is the IPTC copyright. And so the copyright will be your name. Copyright status, copyrighted. Now, your images are copyrighted to you, whether you say it or not. But I think you might as well say it. So there's no issue, okay? Excuse me, rights usage terms. You can put something here if you want, or you can leave it blank. I often put something like image not to be reproduced, maybe without permission or artist's permission. Copyright info URL, if you have a website that you want to, where you show your images, you might want to put that there as well. Then below it says creator, that would be you again. If you want to put your address and so on, that's great. Maybe your email. I don't usually put my address, and I don't put my phone number because I don't necessarily want people contacting me. But or that way anyway, but I certainly, will put my email address and so on. And that's what I put. All of this other information is generally put in anyway. So all I generally deal with is the IPTC copyright and creator. Okay. So save changes as a new preset. And so I'll save this as CETA demo, I suppose, and create it. And now you can see it here on the left-hand side. It says CETA demo. And so the information that I typed in will be embedded in every single file that I import, at least in this case. And I can change that if I want to. Keywords are words that will be associated or attached to each image. So you want to be kind of general with those. So for example, these are at the beach. Okay, so I can type in beach, but I might not want to type in June 8th. Well, I might not want to type in who this person is, because this person isn't in every single image. Or I might not want to type in steps, because there aren't steps in every image, but they are all at the beach. So I'd want that. As you add words, as you import more and more images and add words, if you choose to do so, those words will show up here as suggestions. Okay, so it's up to you. Finally, and actually in some ways most importantly, you need to say where the images are going. And you want them to go to that folder that you made, that I made, a long time ago. So I told, let's see, I made the images here in my MPC folder in Art12, Fall 2021, and Lightroom. And then remember, I had this folder in there, in the Lightroom folder, that says images. And that, finally, that's where I want my images to go. So they won't be removed from your hard drive or wherever they happen to be. They will be copied into this folder. So this is where I want them to go, images. And so I'll go back here, and here in my hard drive, I have a lot of stuff, as you can see. MPC, ARTP12, Fall 2021, Lightroom, images. Okay, and now you can see here, it says 6/8/2018 beach, and there are 9 images, and those will be imported to this place. Okay, one last thing here, under destination, it also asks how you want them to be placed, so to speak. Do you want to put them into a subfolder? So I can say yes, and I can entitle it test or something like that, or have nothing. Uncheck that. And how do I want them organized? By date, into just dumped into one folder that, you know, I can select a whole bunch of folders to be imported and just have them dumped into one folder. I can choose by date. And if I do that, then I have a choice of the date format, which is extensive. So you can, as you can see, there are many selections, you know, you can do it all numerically. You can have the year and then just the month. You can have the month as a number or a word or abbreviated. Up to you. I myself prefer, when I do it by date, 2021, you know, the year / the month written out, and then the date. Is that the date? Well, that's today's date. Yeah, right. So whatever the date will be, but it's up to you. Generally for myself, I have them imported by my original folders because I've already organized them usually. So I can just have them imported in that way. So let's say I want to import 2 folders. I can do that by holding down the Command key, which I think is the Alt key for PC users. And then I can select more than one folder at a time. And now if we look down here to where the images are going, under images, it now shows these two folders. So I've done all of this. I've selected the images I want. I've told Lightroom how I wanted them imported and what I want applied, if anything. And finally, I can come to the very bottom and click the import button, and Lightroom will begin importing the images. And if you look to the upper left-hand corner here, it says copy and import photos, and you get a progress bar. And I haven't selected that many images, which is good. And so it does this pretty quickly. If you're importing hundreds of images in, it'll take longer. So this, this window comes up. Non-raw files were not converted to DNG. Not all of the files being imported were raw camera files. Only raw camera files were converted. So if there were any JPEGs in here or something made as they were, so you click OK. And then 2 more operations will be in progress. That's because I assume because I have 2 separate folders being brought in. And you can see that progress is being made slowly. When these have been actually been imported, Lightroom will let me know. You can cancel if you want to. I don't want to, but you can click on it, and you can see that the specific progress of 4 of 23 previews have been made. Convert to DNG. I can tell it to stop by clicking on an X.
I have a question.
Yes, indeed.
So for our assignment, what we should title when we import to the Lightroom?
That is a good question. So why can't I get this? Oh, here we go. I see I've lost a couple of people. In the assignments, I'll show you how I want them entitled. But what I want you to do is make a folder entitled with your name, first and last, and then which assignment it is, like assignment number 1 or depth of field or what have you. And then within that folder, you'll make at least one other folder, as many folders as are needed for that assignment. So, for, let's say for a depth of field assignment, it's a 3-part assignment. And so you'll make 3 folders within that initial folder, each one entitled with that, you know, what that part of the assignment. And then on the actual image, so for the actual image, I should say, let me go to a different image so I don't change those. So this image has a very strange title. I downloaded it. DE8 blah 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 blah. Right. So for the assignment, I would want you to change the title to whatever the assignment is referring to. So let's say it's showing, which it isn't, but shallow depth of field. And I used an aperture of, let's see, f5.6. Okay. And so now that is the title of the image. So that's what I would want you to do. And again, reiterating that Lightroom is really, really picky about the symbols that you use. So periods and dashes only, as you can see, that's what I did here. Okay, now I look at my dock and I see Lightroom is bouncing up and down. And so I'll go back to that. And so it has finally finished importing. And it says smart previews were built or already exist for 23 photos. Don't worry about the already exist. Generally, they don't. But if you were to import the same image again, that you had already imported. It wouldn't build a new preview. So I click OK. OK. And now it continues to do stuff. So it's building these previews, which shouldn't take too long. But you can see that all of the images, both folders that I that I selected are here. So 23 images. And now I can open it up and take a look at it, even though it's still building the previews. If they're a whole lot, it may look really pixelated, but here they are. Okay. So that is how you import images. Any questions? All good? All right. And you can see it's still building the preview, and it will eventually finish. And the images will show up here in the library module. So again, the library module is the part of Lightroom that we use to import images into and to look at those images. So if you look at, if you check out the subsequent Lightroom videos that I've made and the lectures, it talks about, or they talk about what to do after that. And I will do another Zoom meeting dealing with that. So what we do once we've gotten the images finally imported into Lightroom, and you can see this is still building the previews, and hopefully your computers will deal with this much more efficiently than my poor computer seems to do. But here we, I think, have finally reached the end of building the previews. Yes. So they will show up in a grid. When you double click on one, it's pretty dark, you can see it on its own. You can see that the cursor has a plus sign in it. If you do a single click, it comes in closer. Another single click, it goes back to the full frame. And a double click will bring you back to the grid view. That is the entire import. Okay. Okay, so that was part one of Lightroom. So making a catalog, and you can make as many catalogs as you want, but making a catalog, and I advise for this class just making one catalog for, you know, ARTP12 fall 2021. Making the catalog, setting the preferences, and then actually importing the images into Lightroom. So I will close that out and see you guys again. Well, I can see Teresa, and I see that, is it Annalyn? Annalyn?
Annalyn.
Pardon?
Annalyn.
Annalyn, hi. So the two loyal followers who remained throughout, thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
answering
you.
the question.
So I hope that makes things relatively clear as to how to start with Lightroom. And of course, we'll go on from there. So do check out the module, the Lightroom module, where there's a lot more stuff, and we will talk more soon.
Will we do this on Wednesdays? I'm off on Wednesdays, so.
I will try for Mondays, and
Okay.
that seems, some people have problems with Tuesdays, others with Wednesdays, and course, some people will have, it'll be
Yeah.
all over, but Mondays seem to be a little more workable for more people. But we'll see. So the next one I'll try for a Monday and see how that goes. I think that most people realize that it's not required and that I will be posting the recording, which I will. And so, yeah, they don't attend. And again, it's not required because the class is listed as asynchronous, which means that we don't actually have any scheduled that all of the work, all of the information for the class is on Canvas available to you. Still, I think it's nice to meet. I always absorb information better in person, but we're not all the same way.
Where do
Yeah,
we
that's
see the
right.
recorded?
Pardon me?
Where do we see the recorded video?
As soon as I get it from Zoom onto my computer and then from my computer to YouTube and then YouTube to Canvas. There are easier ways, but that one seems to work the best for me somehow. But so hopefully by this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? you guys?
Have a good day.
Thank you.
I
You
have
too.
one.
Thanks for coming. Yeah. Teresa.
When you download Lightroom, does it allow you, like Norton will allow you to have it on 2, 3 separate devices?
That's a
I
good
order-
question. I believe, well, you can certainly have Lightroom, just the regular Adobe Lightroom. But for Classic, I don't know. I don't know. I'll
I have
try
a
and find that
Surface
out.
as well, so,
Pardon?
okay. I have a Surface as well, and sometimes I do my homework downstairs, so,
Gotcha. Uh-huh.
Good
Yeah,
enough.
I'll try and find that out for you.
okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. I enjoyed
yeah.
it.
Very
much.
long, but okay.
Oh, well.
Cool.
Okay, thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.